And then we move on to the next subject, which is depopulation and displacement. Orphan trains and insane asylums. So we're going to start off with the orphan trains movement, repopulating the New World, I'd like to say. So the official narrative of the orphan train movement was that it was a charitable initiative that relocated approximately 250,000 orphaned or abandoned children from overcrowded cities in the eastern United States, especially New York City, to rural areas in the Midwest and West between 1854 and 1929. Organized by groups like the Children's Aid Society and the New York Federal Orphan Hospital, the movement aimed to provide better lives for children living in poverty, particularly those who were homeless or living in squalid conditions. Why was there so many orphans and abandoned children in the mid-19th century? This was before the Civil War, and even today, in poverty-ridden countries, parents never abandon their children. And while some orphan records exist, many children's origins remain unclear, with incomplete documentation of who they were, where they came from, and their life stories being placed on trains. This appears to be part of a coordinated effort to repopulate areas in the West and Midwest US of A after a major reset or disaster event caused widespread depopulation. Beyond the orphan trains in the United States, similar movements of displaced children occurred in Europe during the 19th and early 20th century. For instance, the Home Children movement in Britain sent orphans and poor children to Canada and Australia. So again, we have this official narrative of why these children were being taken from their family. Were they orphans or not? We don't know. They could have just been taken from their families. What happened to their families? If they were orphans, what happened to their mum and dad? What happened? Could there have been an event, a reset event? Their families were taken from them, or their families died during such an event, and then they were taken out west to repopulate a lot of these cities that had been affected the most. Organized by groups like the Children's Aid Society and New York Foundling Hospital. Now we know what these non-profits and these charities really do behind the scenes. We know that they are actually responsible for the exact opposite of what they say they are operating for. Conditions of orphans in the 1800s were heartbreaking. So why were these kids, why were these kids just enslaved in sweatshops, in these factories? Like, what type of person enslaves a child to literally slave away their childhood in a factory? Who were these people owning these factories? Well, we know they were the robber barons, which we will discuss later on. To enslave these children, to take these children's childhoods from them, and here they are on the train, and they just ship them off. No one knows anything about them. It's kind of like the original child trafficking, really. Just trafficking these children around the United States, around the world. They're doing the same now. All of the kids that come through illegally from the border, they get picked up by the old benevolent US government, only wanting the best for the people and the illegals, and they just ship these kids off. Probably end up in some underground military base somewhere, being tested on by the lizards. I don't know, maybe not, maybe too far. But again, just all these kids just taken. No acknowledgement of their true history, where they come from, who their parents were, off to start a new life, off to be re-educated and to repopulate. And it moves on to a subject that would seem disconnected, but as I will explain, this is what I think happened to their parents. So insane asylums, why was everyone losing their minds in the 19th century? The official narrative is that insane asylums in the United States, particularly the Kirkbride asylums, emerged during the 19th century as part of the moral treatment movement. Because they were so moral back then. Not like everyone was enslaved and suffering from, poverty. which sought to reform the care of the mentally ill. Before this, individuals with mental illness were often confined in prisons or poor houses with little to no treatment. So they just decided all of a sudden, they just had this massive shift in their moral perspective, moral compass got recalibrated, and now they're here to help. The Kirkbride Plan, developed by psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride in the mid-1800s, emphasised that patients needed a calm, structured environment for recovery with natural light, ventilation and open spaces to help restore their mental health. So this is the design that we see here of this Kirkbride Plan, and it almost looks like a bat wing, doesn't it? It looks like kind of like a Batman wing. And it was designed so that no matter where the patients were on these wings, they would always be exposed to natural light and ventilation. But then you look at these layouts of these hospitals and you see that it's not just the hospital itself, it's a full-on compound where they have stables, they have like little factories, they have gardens. A fully self-sufficient, isolated environment for whomever exists in this compound, so we're told. And what we're told is that some of the reasons for people being incarcerated in these mental asylums were based on cultural attitudes and societal norms of the time, including mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression. A lot of people will be fucked today then, and other diagnosable mental illnesses were key reasons for admission. Hysteria. Women in particular were often diagnosed with hysteria for exhibiting emotional instability. Nothing's changed there then. Anxiety or defiance of social expectations. The only fangirls are out. Get them locked up. Epilepsy. Epilepsy was often poorly misunderstood. Postpartum depression. New mothers suffering from postpartum depression or psychosis could be institutionalized. Alright, again, just taking the mum away. Alcoholism and drug addiction. Moral insanity. People deemed morally deviant, such as those engaging in homosexuality, adultery or prostitution. It's the LGBT crew, they're gone. That's the OnlyFans, they're gone. Old age and dementia. Just, get rid of all the oldies. All the old people that remember the old world. This one I find very interesting. Political or social non-conformity. In some cases, people who did not conform to societal norms or were considered politically troublesome could be declared insane. Now, what's happened over the past 4 years where a specific group of people didn't conform to societal norms and were considered politically troublesome? What happened? What would have happened to those group of people if they were placed in this time frame? They would have been carted off to these facilities. I remember them building certain compounds and facilities over the past 4 years where certain people were carted off to. Odd. Oh well, maybe just me. Financial exploitation, trauma, grief. So yeah, this is a look at one of them. I don't know where this actually was, but this is an example of one of the Kirkbride asylums. And you look at this again. Here he is, top hats, posing. Looks very derelict out front. But you look at this, and what I see is like a very, very over the top European-esque palace. You could have plunked this in. You could literally knock down the Palace of Versailles and then plonk that there and tell everyone that was what it was. But look at it. It almost kind of reminds me of that of the Victoria Terminus in India. That sort of style on the architecture there. But just such overkill. Just to place people that you deem as socially deviant people, they get to live in a palace like such. And as I will start to show you now, where these places were located. The Danvers State Hospital, supposedly built in 4 years, and look, we see here, look how big these places are. Like, these are full-on compounds, and they built this in 4 years. And look at this panorama from afar. Like, look how big it just dominates the skyline. dominates the skyline. Again, all mud flooded out at the bottom here. Old world Tartaria looking castle-like structure, bit of Antiquitech on top. And this was it in 1878. It has underground tunnels attached to it. And again, they have massive gardens. They have everything that you would need to be completely self-sustainable here. Destroyed in 2006. So I believe that Danvers State, this was actually what Arkham Asylum, if you watch familiar with Batman, Arkham Asylum, where they house all of the criminals, Joker, so on and so on. This was actually the inspiration for Arkham Asylum. I mean, just look at the place, guys. 4 years to build this, out in the middle of nowhere of Massachusetts. And then we have Napa State Hospital, California. No construction date, just opened up in 1875. And the story behind this Napa State Hospital is that there was an overflow of mental patients in Stockton Mental Asylum, 200 to be exact. So they needed a place to house these 200 mental patients, and they just decided to build this out in California in the late 19th century, Wild West. Yeah, no electricity, no power tools, just, again, it's like, this is really cool. I'd like to have been able to read what that said. But then, just the attention to detail, it's like, you know, this is for mental patients. Like, why are they being housed in something like that? Why are you building something like this for them? I mean, just look at the size of this thing. For 200 people? For 200 people, this is what you're building? I mean, they really recalibrated their moral compass, you know, to give people such a luxurious standard of living. This big turret with these patterns on. No construction photos, no date of construction. It just opened. Just opened because it was already there. And then just some more insane asylums for us to check out and inspect. Arkansas's Lunatic Asylum, 1873. Again, just looking very old, very weathered. It's been there for a long time. St. Elizabeth's Hospital in DC. This is what it looks like today. Completely abandoned, mud flooded. This was it in 1870 when it was in use. St. Elizabeth, this was it in 1852. So that was in 1870, and this was it in 1852. So already built out, top hats have already got there, already striking the pose. But again, you know, this is a point in time. They didn't have the brick. Like, how many bricks is in this whole compound? Got a little ladder going up there. Osawatomie State Hospital in Kansas in 1857. And also Osawatomie in 1880, there was only 700 people there, so I don't know how many people were there during this period, but it was definitely less than 700 people. Yet here we are, fully kitted out. I mean, this was a little bit later because of the because they had the car there, but this is supposedly when it was first built. What else? Oh, this is just another photo of it from, like, the scale of it from above. North Wisconsin Hospital for the insane near Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Winnebago Mental. Again, just the size of it almost looks like. I'll show you some photos in part 2 as well. Actually, I'll show you properly on cities that have similar, like, landscapes. This looks like a computer chip to me. This looks like a big computer chip. You know, all these, that infrastructure there. 2 years to build that as well. Come on. I mean, look at this. They get a fancy gate upon their arrival. Look at the little bit of Antiquitech on there. This one is Fulton State in Missouri. 4 years to build this whole complex. In 1847, guys. In Missouri, of all places. So, what do you think the purpose of these buildings were? Evidently, these buildings were not built by who they said they were built by, and they were not built to house the mentally insane. An idea that was brought forth from a channel that I really like and I really appreciate his work, Lucius Aurelian on YouTube. He did a video where he put forth the idea that these could have been old world compounds or reset compounds, in that an old world civilization knew of a forthcoming reset, and they built these self-sufficient compounds out in the middle of nowhere, because they are out in the middle of nowhere. They're not connected to any of these cities, they're completely disconnected from society, out in the middle of nowhere, so that they could be a multi-purpose, they could have multiple purposes. They could house you, they could feed you during the reset period, but then you could also use it as a kind of a defense, a form of defense against survivors of a reset that would maybe come looking for food, looking for survivors. And I think that's possibly what happened. I think these places were found and the original peoples were not there anymore. And I believe that survivors of the reset that would not play ball with the new narrative, that would not, as we've shown happens when you don't want to play ball with the narrative, the parents were taken from their families or taken from their children, and they were carted off to here. They were carted off to here, where they were lobotomized, where they were probably tortured, where they were probably just left in a vegetative state for the rest of their life until they rotted away, with the rest of the world not knowing anything about them and their history, their family from there on out. I think that the wars were a cover-up. I think that the wars were a cover-up for either a greater global war or maybe smaller disputes that was between an old world civilization and a newer breakaway civilization, and the breakaway civilization won, and they've done their best to wipe the evidence of any prior civilization, or they made use of certain buildings whilst they were in need of them, and then they shipped all the kids off to repopulate a lot of these old cities that some of it were destroyed via these supposed fires, but they were systematic clearing out, destroying all the buildings they didn't want, and then they moved all these kids in to repopulate it with a fresh new narrative and a new history to move on with from there on out. That's what my thoughts are of this.
If you enjoyed this presentation and feel inspired to support both yourself and this channel, then head over to primalalchemy.co.uk. Awaken your potential with the world's only visionary health brand. Discover our collection of tonic herbal elixirs, rare crystals, and holistic health technologies. All chosen and created with intention, so you can focus on the energy you bring into your life. Whether you're grounding yourself, seeking clarity, or elevating your routine, Primal Alchemy supports every step of your journey. Use code REBUS10 for 10% off all superfood elixirs at primalalchemy.co.uk.